Hello, algebra friends. I hope that 2.7 and 2.8 went all right for you. If they didn't, we will go over questions next week when I'm back. But yeah, we're just going to jump right into 2.9 right now for the sake of just making sure we get through all of this. And then you'll have some time to work and ask questions of each other or of who I think is Mrs. Prince in there with you right now. Today's lesson is one of my favorites because it is super applicable to life. How many times in life are you like, oh, it's a sale for 25% off? And then you're like, what is that? This is going to help you figure out what that is. So the setup for it that I am going to work through, and I kind of color coded it for you so you can see what is what. But it's percent over 100 equals is over of is kind of the like shortcutty type one that just helps you think through the words you're working with. The concept of it is this. It's the percent over 100 is the part over the whole thing that you're going to be working with. So we're just going to jump right in and set some of these up. It says finding a percent with proportion. So the first thing we're going to do, and maybe you need a quick refresher, this is a proportion, right? These are proportions. Something over something equals something over something. So this one says what percent, okay? So that means that's our unknown. So whenever it says what, whatever, if it says what percent, that's your variable. So we're just going to call that X, okay? Of 56 is 42. So it's the word that comes after that we're talking about that you're going to use in place of percent over 100 equals is over of. So here's what I suggest. We know we're working with a proportion here because it said find percent with proportion. So if you set up your proportion, it says what percent? Well, percent is our top here, and we just said that's our unknown. So that's going to go there. This bottom number will always be 100. That will never change. So you can always put the 100 there right away if you want to. And then there is the is. Okay, so is 42. That's going to go on top just like it was up here. And then of 56. That's going to go down below. So that's your setup. That's how you come up with what goes where. It's the percent over 100 equals the part over the whole thing. Okay? Percent over 100 equals part over whole, or percent over 100 equals is over of. Then from here, this is math that you should already know how to do. When you are solving a proportion, that's when we cross multiply. So we're going to go like this, x times 56. So that's 56x. And then cross the other way, 100 times 42, keeping that equal sign in between, is 4,200. Okay, so now we're here, and we're just going to solve for x. So we're going to divide both sides by 56. And it is 4,200 divided by 56. You get x equals 75. Now, that's our answer, but what is our answer? It says what percent of 56 is 42? So it's not the number 75, it's 75%. Okay, now think about that. 42 is 75% of 56. Does that make sense? If you put it back into a sentence, like, okay, let's think through, does this setup work? Does it make sense? That's really good for helping you figure out like, yep, I have a reasonable answer here, or no, that is not a reasonable answer at all. This is reasonable, right? 42 is about 75%. It's exactly 75% actually of 56. Okay, what percent of 56 is 42? 75%. Okay, so using that concept, this is the exact same type of problem, letter B. I want you to try it. So I'm just going to not speak for a little while, So you can give it a go. Okay, hopefully you are close to an answer. If not, that's okay. Remember, it's always going to be a 100 on bottom. We are asking again, what percent? So that's our unknown, percent over 100. And then we want is over of, okay, or part over whole. So in this case, what percent is 54? That's going to be on top of 90. Did I even use the right color? Yes. Okay, so that should be your setup, and then you cross multiply it. 90 times x equals 5,400, and then you would divide by 90. You can just plug that into your calculator, and you get x equals 60. And the question is what percent? That means it's 60%. Okay, so 54 is 60% of 90, which makes sense, right? Because 50% of 90 would be half of 90, so 45. 54 is more than that, so 60% being 54. That makes sense, okay? So proportions are set up like that. I like the proportion way. I just feel like the words help you figure out where to place it. So if you can remember percent over 100 equals is over of, I think that way is really nice. I also really like using the percent equation. There's just a couple things you got to remember when you use the percent equation. So in the percent equation, okay, it looks like this. Again, I kind of have things color coded a little bit. You have to make sure that you change your percents to decimals by dividing by 100, or that would be the same thing as moving your decimal point 2 places to the left, okay? And then some things to think of here. When you see is in math, it's an equal sign. When you see of in math, it's multiplication. And when you see the word what, that's your variable, that's your unknown, okay? So we're gonna kind of use those concepts with this equation to figure out how we set this up. All right, so example 2. Now this is using the percent equation instead of using proportions. And could you use proportion here? Absolutely. Like the proportions still work. It's not like you have to use percent equation in one scenario and you have to use proportions in another scenario. It's more like I'm giving you 2 ways to solve the same problem. Sometimes I'm going to tell you I want proportions because I want to know that you can see the other way. Sometimes I'm going to tell you I want the percent equation because I want to know that you understand that way. But ultimately, like in life, if you're trying to figure out a problem like this, you could use either way and you'll get to the right answer, okay? Okay, so here's what I want you to take a look at. It says, what percent of 40 is 2.5, okay? So I said earlier, when you see the word what, that's your unknown, okay? So what percent, we're not gonna mess with the percent quite yet. What did I say of was? Do you remember? That's multiplication. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little dot there for multiplication. What percent, let's just do this, okay, of 40, and my colors aren't gonna necessarily fit here, but that's okay, is, what did we say is was in math? An equal sign. So is 2.5. Okay, now cram that together. Basically what we're saying here is x times 40 equals 2.5. Well, to solve that, this is what we did last week, right? This is solving an equation in one step. So we would have to divide by 40, which makes this 1, but whatever you do to one side, you gotta do to the other. So we get x equals, and then you plug in 2.5 divided by 40, and you get this number. Okay, now the question was, what percent? This is the decimal version of a percent. So when we want to turn a decimal into a percent, we multiply by 100, which moves our decimal point 2 to the right. I said left earlier because when we're changing a percent to a decimal, we go to the left. But when we're changing a decimal to a percent, we go to the right. We multiply by 100. So this is going to be x equals 6.25, and it was what percent? 6.25%. Okay, so 2.5 is 6.25% of 40, which makes sense to me. Hopefully does to you. Okay, so letter B here. See if you can set that one up. What percent of 84 is 63? I'll give you a minute to try that. All right, did you get it? Tell your neighbor what you got. See if they got the same thing. So what percent, that's your unknown. Oh dear, come back, here we go. What percent of is times 84 is equals 63. Okay, so of times is equals. So solve it, divide by 84, and then you plug that into your calculator. 63 divided by 84 is 0.75. To turn a decimal into a percent, we multiply by 100. So x is 75%. Okay, and again, that makes sense. 75% of 84 should be around 63. Okay, example 3 is finding a part. So percent over 100 equals is over of. Equals part over whole. So we're finding that is portion, if you will. And here's what it says. Okay, a dress shirt that normally costs $38.50 is on sale for 30% off. What is the sale price of the shirt? Now, before you start solving this for 30% of $38.50, you could do it that way, but then you have more work to do at the end. I prefer to do my extra work at the beginning so that I don't forget to do the extra work at the end, because that's what tends to happen when people save it for the end. So what I would do in this scenario is I would think, what am I truly finding here, okay? If it costs $38.50 and it's on sale for 30% off of that price, then the price I'm actually paying for is 70% of the shirt, right? It's 30% off. So 100% minus that 30%, I'm paying for 70% of the shirt. So I would think of it as this statement. What is 70% of $38.50? Okay, now you can do this one of two ways. You can do the percent equation, or you can do percent over 100 equals is over of. In this case, I think it's easiest to do the percent equation. I'll show you why I think that is right now. What is our unknown? Is equals. So notice our variable's isolated already. Then there's hardly any math left to do. So that's why I like percent equation here, because our x is by itself. How do you write 70% as a decimal? Because we can't write this as 70 right now. That's going to do a huge number. 70% is going to be divide by 100, so 0.70, or you can just call that 0.7, would be the same thing, okay? And then of is times, and then the 38.50. So you're just going to plug into your calculator 0.7 times 38.50, and you get $26.95. cents. So a shirt that's 30% off, that it was originally $38.50, is now only about $27. Okay. Okay, look at this second one. A family sells a car to a dealership for 60% less than they paid for it. So if they're selling it for 60% less than they paid for it, they're selling it for 40%, right, of what they paid for it, because it's 60% less. So 100% minus the 60% is 40% of what they paid for it. It says they paid $9,000 for the car. What price did they sell the car for? So basically we're saying, what is 40% of 9,000 is how you could think of that. Again, if you want to set up the proportion, you could set up the proportion, but like I said, the way this is set up, this is your x, is your equals, so you have isolated your variable already, which is what we want to do. So what is 40%? We're going to write that as 0.4 or 0.40 is fine, of, so times 9,000. Okay, and you're going to plug that into your calculator. 0.4 times 9,000 is, and this is money we're talking about, so $3,600. Okay, for what price did they sell the car? They sold it for $3,600. Okay, so that's finding the part. What is? That's the is portion. I maybe should have just done one of those as a proportion for you, but I didn't. We'll do these ones as proportions. Maybe that will be helpful. Okay, so finding a whole, finding the base, finding the of portion, okay? This first one, it says 125% of what number is 17.5. So if we're going to set this up as a proportion, remember it's the percent, 125, always over 100, equals is over of. So our of is our unknown. Of what? The is the 17.5. And then you can just cross multiply that. So we're going to go 125x equals 17.5 times 100. Oops, 17.5 times 100 is 1,750. And then we're going to divide. So x comes out to, what is that? 14. Okay, so now think of that. 125% of the number 14 is 17.5. So 100% would be 14. We're going 25% over that to 17.5. That makes great sense to me. Hopefully it does to you. Okay, and then letter B I'll set up as an equation just so you can see each one of these, one of the two ways. If we write this one as an equation, whenever you write it as a percent equation, you have to take your percent and make it the decimal, right? So 30% as a decimal is 0.30, or you can call it 0.3. Of is times. What number is our unknown? Is in math is equals, and then 12.5. So we're going to divide by 0.3. And x comes out to, if you plug that into your calculator, it is 41.66666666. That just keeps going. That's 41 and 2/3 as a fraction, which is what I would prefer. If you're gonna write it as a decimal, then put the bar over top. Please don't call it 41.7 because then you have rounded, and we don't want a rounded. We want the exact number. Okay. All right, home stretch, 2 more. There is a formula for finding simple interest. It says the simple interest formula is given below. That's this formula, where I is your interest, P is your principal, which if you just think of principal as the original amount, the starting amount is your principal. And then R is the annual interest rate. T is your time in years. So just keep in mind the interest rate you're going to write as a decimal in this type of problem. And it literally is taking numbers and just making sure you're dropping them into the right places. So if you take a look at example 5 here, it says you deposited $840 in a savings account. okay? That's what you started with. That is your principal. It earns a simple interest rate of 4.5%. And again, we said our interest rate should be written as a decimal, not as a percent. So even though it is a decimal right now, it's representing a percent. So the way we write that as a decimal is we divide by 100. 2 places back. So 0.045, that's your R. Okay, so we have our P, we have our R. You want to keep the money in the account for 4 years. That's our time. How much interest? So our unknown is our interest. And then just check, is it a reasonable answer? So this is actually a really good interest rate. 4.5% is great these days for what you're getting paid for having your money in an account. So if we're doing I equals PRT, we're solving for interest. Principal is 840. The rate we said was 0.045, and the time is 4. So you would plug that into your calculator. 840 times 0.045 times 4, and you get 151.2. Now, the question is, how much interest will you earn? What does 151.2 mean? Tell your neighbor. Hopefully you turned that into dollars and cents, right? We're talking money, interest, so it should have been $151.20. Okay, even though there was no zero in your calculator, that's 20 cents. Okay. All right, last one. You deposited $125 in a savings account. That's your principal. That earns simple interest rate of 1.75% per year. Not as great of an interest rate, right? So we're going to turn that into a decimal, 1, 2 to the left, because we're dividing by 100. Okay, that's your R. And you earn a total of $8.75 in interest. So that's your interest. The question is, how long was your money in the account? So we want to find T. So if I equals PRT, we call it, well, no, we're not going to go there. Never mind. Excuse me. Goodness. So the interest, 8.75 equals the principal, 125, times the rate, so 0.0175 times T. Okay, now what I would do is I would multiply these two together. So I'm going to go 8.75 equals, when you multiply those, you get 2.1875 T. And now solve for T. So we're going to divide. This is 1. Divide that in your calculator, and what you get is 4. But answer the question. How long was your money in the account? Okay. We said R is our yearly, T is your time in years. Sorry, R is your annual interest rate, your rate for the year. So T is your time in years. So we would say it was in the account for 4 years. All right. That is the whole lesson. You have the rest of class to work on that homework assignment. If you have anything that you missed from this week, you can also use this time to get caught up on that homework. Today's the last day of the 6-week grading period, so anything turned in by today will count toward your 6-week grades. So get it all turned in. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.